Hi, I'm Dave and welcome to my garden railway. Garden railways are such fun, and they're economic too. They combine two of Britain's favourite hobbies, model railways and gardening. Such good value. Let me show you round. As I say, it's probably best to start at the beginning, and this is the beginning of the line, the terminus at Llanturgab, somewhere in mid-Wales, and it's supposed to be rather quaint. Everything on the Vale of Weedol is scratch built, from all sorts of scrap and leftovers. I make just about everything. So let's go and have a look at some other bits. And the pond here at Abernuffy is intended to remind us of Snowdonia and perhaps the Welsh Highland Railway with its rusty bridge. Maybe one day this will become a small inland harbour, perhaps with a narrow boat and the entrance to the Llangoblin Canal, which I think I've found just down there. Then of course there has to be the country halt. In this case it's Rainbow Rock, with its waiting room, our loyal customers from Huddersfield. But the great thing is that this is a National Trust property, and so you can use your National Trust cards to travel on the Vale of Weedol tramway. Now that's what I call a saving. The heart of every railway is the Locomotive Works, and here we are at Loston Bodge, where just about everything is built. You can see here we've got our Waterworks Skertchley, Excelsior, the oldest locomotive on the line, the latest observation coach, just going for a check-up in the workshops, and the Colonial locomotive looks here as though it's been shunting some good stock. So why don't we start with a trip round the workshops? And this is Loston Bodge Works, where I can come and make a mess. And believe me, scratch building locomotives and carriages is very, very messy. But for raw materials I use absolutely anything that I have to hand. I tend to accumulate lots and lots of wood, but my favourite of course is this thin plywood, used mostly for model aeroplanes. And under the bench is my stock of coffee stirrers, kebab sticks, cocktail sticks, and cardboard from cereal packets and all kinds of other packing materials. Then of course there's my box full of scrap metal and containers. I never know what I'm going to need next, so I just keep all sorts of materials ready for the next project. I thought maybe what we could do is tell the story of my railway through its locomotives. This is the first one. Excelsior, built to a Roy Link plan. Starting work in 1976, it took till about 1983 to finish it, and it's been constantly rebuilt ever since. It now has a cheap can motor and one of those standard worm gears for a drive, but it's had all sorts of attempts to get things to be reliable. I keep Excelsior in its original 1980s rather bodgy paintwork, but nevertheless it's the most famous Bagnall 042T on the Vale of Weedol tramway, and that's good enough for me. The The second locomotive that I ever built was this Salford Models Ruston, known as Toad. It has nowadays has a steel chassis and that Salford Models worm gear and drive, which is why we all bought these models. Getting a worm gear and drive was almost impossible back in the 1980s. It's been modified with a driver who sits in the right position with the right controls, and generally it's a quite delightful little locomotive. My third little locomotive was this Fowler play train. It's really hardly anything impressive, and when we moved to Worthing and rebuilt the railway in the garden, I rushed to my box to get this locomotive out of stock and found I'd put it away 20 years previously with dry batteries inside, and it had been absolutely wrecked. Clearly, Excelsior and Sir Archibald were not going to be reliable locomotives for my new railway in Worthing, so I decided to build another one on the same kind of principles. This is Penelope, the Melbourne Gasworks Peckett, said to be quite similar to Sir John Grice, which is currently preserved on the Puffing Billy Railway. I actually went to Melbourne Gasworks to see where Sir John Grice ran, and also to the Puffing Billy Railway where Sir John Grice is disguised as Thomas the Tank Engine, which is rather sad for such a nice locomotive. The drive again is a simple 60p can motor with one of those cheap gears that you can buy online, but the gears have been reinforced with some brass bits and pieces. Has a very simple set of cranks and performs beautifully. Encouraged by the performance of Penelope, the Gasworks Peckett, I decided that I'd like to make a Waterworks Kerr Stuart. It looks like the absolutely ideal narrow gauge locomotive, except like every ideal it comes with a load of snags. The drive is a subframe underneath with the conventional 60p can motor with its drive, traditional steel frames, nothing particularly exceptional, and Duncan has been a mainstay of my railway for the last 10 years and has never been quite satisfactory, but I can't really bear to actually rebuild it. I noticed that lots of people talk about beginners' locomotives, And I hadn't got a diesel, and I certainly hadn't got something simple and reliable, so I built Freddy. And Freddy is a Bodgerton run 040 diesel locomotive based on the usual 1960s locomotive designs. As you can see, it's driven by the minions and forms part of the children's train. That is, when it's not actually pulling coal wagons. This locomotive uses one of those MFA geared motors, and originally with the 6-volt 15-to-1 motor it was very noisy. It now runs on 2.4 volts 15-to-1 MFA motor, which is far more acceptable. I'd always wanted to build a big train bash, but big trains of course are collector's items nowadays. But I was given a chassis that had been slightly bodged and was able to produce Plonkawalla, the big train bash. It's a very simple locomotive using the big train chassis and a plywood body. Well, I suppose we can't forget the rail bus, even though I suppose it's not strictly a locomotive. Hazel, the Bodgerton run rail bus, has tried to put together the kind of features that you'd find on the Irish rail buses with an AEC Regent London bus. It performs very well, but it's just a little bit noisy. But I like it, and it's just right for those winter steamings, especially as it's got lights. I had always simplified and rather cheated at building locomotives, so I decided that I was going to do the ultimate locomotive for my railway. I was going to build Russell, which is a 462, but as a 462 it was going to be just too big, and I found this Blanc-Misseron plan in 16mm today and decided that as an 060 it would be exactly what I wanted. I still used the modular subframe for the drive, but this one has all 6 wheels driven and it was pretty complicated. As you can see though, the drive is again a 30-to-1 MFA motor fitted into a little subframe, and Abigail, the Blanc-Misseron, is probably, well, it's definitely my favourite locomotive That is, until I build another one. But we're not here to spend all day standing around sightseeing. We need to go for some trips on the trains. And after all, this is what garden railways are all about. Sitting in the dappled shade of a silver birch, sipping at my pint of fine old fagpot. All I have to do is watch the trains go by. What could be better? Cheers.